His secondary favorite doctor on Moonbase Alpha. Mr. Anton Phillips, Dr. Bob Mathias.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope, like me, none of you are suffering from hangovers. I'm not suffering. That's, you know, I absorb alcohol really well. Well, I must say it's really great seeing so many people here this year round, and it's a pleasure to be here yet again at another convention. So I know there's some of you who've already heard everything that I've got to say. So I'm just trying to think what I've been up to the last 2 years that you wouldn't have heard about yet. And the answer is not a lot. But we'll try and find something new to talk about. And really, I guess, you know, it's down to you to ask whatever you like, old or new questions, and I'll do my best to answer. So, anybody to kick off? Yes?
What have you been up to recently?
In the last 2 years? All theatre work. You know, everything I do tends to be theatre. I mean, I haven't really been in front of a camera for a very long time. There's a theatre in England called the Bristol Old Vic Theatre, which is one of the oldest theatres in the United Kingdom. Bristol is a very interesting city. It's very, very cultural now. A lot of things happening there, probably more so than anywhere else except London. It's also a city which was built entirely on the proceeds of slavery. Like Liverpool and, you know, one or two other places, several other places. And it's got streets like, you know, White Ladies Hill and Black Boys Common and, you know, so it has this extraordinary history and extraordinary buildings, because all the merchants who profited from slavery plowed it back into architecture, and so, you know, there's a magnificent cathedral, and the churches have some of the tallest spires you ever hope to see. And because of that history, it also had quite a division. I mean, they almost had racial segregation there. So much so that, in fact, there was a bus strike which took place. At the same time, Rosa Parks was being thrown off a bus here in England, in the States, and led to the start of that movement. Round about the same time, something very similar happened in Bristol, because of its employment practices more than anything else. You know, they weren't employing any black people. And when you consider that, you know, most of the black people were asked to come to England to work in things like transport and in the health service, in those sort of service industries, for one city to say, yeah, but we don't want any people driving our buses. So there's a bus boycott, which actually went a long way to changing attitudes in that city. That's a very long way of saying that I've been working at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre, but it is relevant because all my career, acting career, producing, directing career in Britain has been directed at telling our story. You know, the story that, you know, of the immigrants who've come in, the stories that we have at home, back in the Caribbean and so on. Because if we don't tell them, they don't get told. It's as simple as that. So I spent my time doing that and fighting for the funding to do that. The arts in Britain are funded by, to the tune of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds in government money. So I've been fighting for our share of that. What happens is, so a play will open in London, and recently, Hamilton opened in London, and very, very successfully so, and will stay in London for the next 15, 20 years, I don't doubt. But other plays will open, at the National Theatre, wherever, and they stay in London. They never get produced outside. And every city in England has 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 theatres, and none of them putting on black plays. So, a dear friend of mine in Bristol decided that she would try to counter that in that city anyway. So she's been putting on a series of rehearsed readings of all the plays which, it's called Missing Pieces. So it's all the plays which are being done in London, which never get out. But it's also looking at all the classic plays. The Lorraine Hansberry's, for instance, Raisin in the Sun, things like that. So, looking at contemporary, and I've been directing most of those. And we do them at a season, and we do them at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre. And so when I leave here and get back to London, I have to rush to Bristol because there's a whole season waiting for me to start to... well, I mean, it's being put together now and marketed, but the plays need directing, so I'll be going back to do that. So mainly, creatively, that's what I've been doing. And for fun, I've been traveling to countries with beaches, and countries which have beaches which, if don't actually have coconut trees, have the potential for coconut trees. When I first went to England, I went to a swimming pool, and I thought, this is a great pool if you're a polar bear. And I tried to, and then I decided, nope, I will never swim in this country ever again. Nor will I, because it's an island surrounded by water, and so I'm never going to swim from a beach where I can't see a coconut tree or a palm tree or something like that. And so I travel a lot. The Med is just down the road, and it's nice and warm. Lots of islands to choose from. The Greek islands I particularly like. Another question.
When we see, say, an episode of Space 1999, we see the finished product from the camera's point of view. It was very, very different for you. You were looking at the camera, you knew what parts of the sets were forward. Do you ever get to see an episode and have a willing suspension of disbelief?
Ever see an episode and have a suspension of disbelief?
Yes, can you get involved?
Yes, oh yes. Because I think I mentioned yesterday that it's been shown again in Britain recently, and I hadn't really looked at it for years, and I was looking and thinking, wow, this is really pretty good stuff. I mean, because I wasn't in main mission control, so people like Xenia and Prentice get a lot more exposure than I did. And my usual line, yes, Commander, or Commander. They can only hold you in shot for so long when they say so it's been a real pleasure looking back at these things and thinking, boy, look at that set, and look at all those young people. Yes.
Were there a lot of scenes filmed and not in the end shown?
Were there lots of
scenes, camera takes with you and made and not shown in the end?
Ending up on the floor, yes. Yeah. No, because that's sort of inefficient, and money is so important. And certainly I was perfect every time. Every shot. No, there were too many outtakes, I don't think. This business about, okay, we'll shoot it number 97 times to get this angle right. It wasn't really like that. People just had to get on with it.
No, I mean, not outtakes because they were not perfect or something, but scenes as such which were not used in the end. We know of Nick Tate and in Space Brain there were scenes that were not in the film.
Yes, I mean, and I just wonder if there's somebody somewhere having them, in a box. I suppose they would have been out by now, wouldn't they? No, I think it was all pretty tight. That's certainly my memory of it. Anyway.
directors that you happen to work with on space that you found their techniques useful for yourself as a director later on in the stage?
That I've directors that
Any
I
directorial techniques that you observed when you were working on space that might have come of use to you later on in your directing career?
Yes, I mean you really do learn from everyone, you know, and like every actor pays a lot of attention to what the director says. It helps. But I mean, a lot of what I do as a director, it certainly comes from what I thought are the best practices of directors that I'd worked with. And you know, working with someone like Ray Austin, for instance, who, you know, there isn't anything arty about him. I mean, he just needed to tell that story. And certainly as a director, that's something that I learned. You've just got to make sure you're telling the story that's there. And don't try and impose your ego on it, or you might want to tell a story from a particular angle. But as long as you're clear about that and you're not undermining what the writer is trying to do, that's okay. So telling the story is really the thing that I've learned from people like Charlie Crichton, Ray Austin, and so on. That was their and they were open to ideas as well. So if they set up a scene in a certain way, and they want, they're certainly open to saying, well, hey, look, can I try this? And they'd say yes or no. You could try it, and they say, yeah, we'll go with that. Or no, I prefer it my way, and we'll go with that, which is more often. Yes.
I was curious, how did you prepare for the role?
Sorry.
I was curious, how did you prepare for the role? Because I'm watching you right now, and I remember Mathias in the show, and he's so clinical, serious, a real professional doctor, and he seems a bit different from that. You pin the role so well. Every time I see you in the series, like you said, you were perfect on camera. How did you prepare for the role?
I suppose, because of your theatre training, you don't just come to something with a surface idea. You do research. I mean, one of the things I was trying to think. Space 1999 was fairly early in my career, but I played a lot of doctors. I played doctors on the Saint. I was a doctor. I think on certainly on one or two similar kind of one-off plays on television. I played doctor, and every time I had to play a doctor, I'd go to my doctor. And whatever I'm supposed to be doing, I'd say to him, "What would happen in this case?" And he'd say, "Oh yes, well, this is what we do with the patient." So even if there wasn't a technical advisor on set, which they would have, I mean, like when I played a doctor in General Hospital, there was always a technical doctor on set to say, "This is how you take a temperature," or if you're going to beat him in the heart. I think even in one of the space episodes, I had to thump somebody in the chest, didn't I?
Yeah.
And there's a doctor standing by. Because if you hit him hard enough, you'll stop his heart. I remember the actor saying to the doctor, says, "Look, if he stops my heart, you'll get it going again, won't you?" So that helped, just being prepared. And then the thing about television acting, I'm told, is to think it.
You're enjoying it, right?
If you think it, it comes through on the camera. So you focus and you don't get discouraged. When I was cast for the first episode, Breakaway, and pitched up on set, and okay, so the moon is tumbling all around the place, and panic, and Lee Katzner, who was directing it, I had to run to this column where you speak into, what's that called?
Compost.
Right. So I had to run in there and, yes, Commander, whatever the line was. So we all stood by, And I started to do some heavy breathing, as if I had been running for half a mile, as you would. And if you're panicked, you know, the adrenaline's flowing. So I built myself up, and he was looking at me. What is wrong with him? And he said action, and boom, I was on and did that scene. And that was it. He was really pleased, and I think he's the one who said to Sylvia and Jerry, keep him. And I think just the way he was looking at me, thinking, wow. Yeah, and it worked. Yeah, in terms of what we were doing, and I think that's how I got the rest of the series, just from that one scene. Preparation, you know, thinking it through, thinking logically. You know, if the all hell is breaking loose around you, you know, you're not going to stroll up casually. You're going to be, you know, wide-eyed and just barely suppressing terror. You're on the brink of death, aren't you? And so you got to do that.
Just one more thing to add on top of that, there's a garden of fear. Everybody is kind of stoned and going around as they're going to the planet, and your character remains very clinical with cunning until he goes off. You offer him a drink, and then you say, and you drink it, and then you see that, oh, okay, that was perfect.
Yeah, so who directed? Was that Ray? Who directed that episode?
Crichton.
Yeah.
Charles Crichton.
Was it Charlie? Okay. Because again, I mean, that's an instance where I suggested something and he said, yeah, sure, go ahead. You know, sort of sipping the medicine that Martin didn't want. Yeah, and the one thing I regret about it is that there just wasn't a little bit more humor in it. Yeah, I look at all the pictures, not me, that are produced. I think I want to see one where I ever smile. And if you look at it, very few people ever smile in this thing. Yeah, and I think that was probably the one thing which would have really improved it, if there was just a little bit more levity. Yes?
Yeah, when you had the chance to choose a role to play on film, what would it be?
Well, when they make the life story of Obama. I mean, Morgan Freeman would be too old for it.
Going back to the humor, I asked Barbara this yesterday. What is your most humorous memory of working on memory?
Well, I suppose probably a lot of people would say it's Charlie Crichton and his foam. Shouting, more foam! The foam is filling up mission control, and something was happening right across, and he waded through it. And I mean, he was a whole old, heavy-set guy, you know. But it was as if he was just, nothing was there. He needed to get over there, and the fact that he was up to his waist in foam didn't seem to make any difference. And I guess it's the off-camera things, you know, the jokes you have with people and the humor. Going in with my dog, yes, that was pretty funny. Especially as it was an English bull terrier. But very friendly, but bull terriers are not the prettiest looking dogs. So, you know, people tend to make a path for you when you're walking with a bull terrier. No, it's a long time ago as well, I can't remember all the details. Yes?
What's your favorite episode filming, or even just a scene that you particularly like for your character?
Well, I tell you, just that little scene with Clifton, with us playing chess. Yeah, I just think the way it was shot through the chessboard and all that. I saw that one the other day and I quite liked it. I mentioned it to Clifton, he said, did we?
I think you beat him in that scene.
I love Another Time, Another Place, and that's with the duplicate Alphans, and you come back to Earth, and there are two moons, and in the Regina's dream sequence, she clocks you on the head, and you fall down. Do you remember? I know it's a long time ago. How was that like a one shot and done thing? Was that a complicated setup because things are moving in slow motion? It's shot in like a very dreamlike fashion, and then we see what she sees in her mind, but then in reality, she's wailing on your skull.
That was probably Paul Weston's skull.
Okay, good.
Because Paul was my stunt double. And he had, makeup, wig, everything. But he's a much bigger guy than me. I mean, he's quite athletic. And when my wife was on set for once, he was there. We had some stunt to do, and he was there, fully made up. And I said to him, "Oh, look, you see that woman over there? That's my wife. Go and sit down beside her." And he went over and he went to kiss her, and she went, "Oh, yeah." It did fool her, just for a minute. Really nice guy, Paul. He's been to conventions, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Paul Weston.
Peterborough.
Peterborough.
But not in the States? No? Okay. Anybody else? Sure.
What, if anything, do you remember about the window busting open in Medical Center?
Yes, me desperately trying to save the situation with shaving foam. I looked at that the other day and I thought, now that is tacky. Trying to really give it some urgency. Well, of course, when you first read the script, you think, they're killing me off. To be honest, I mean, what I remember is watching how the guys set it up. Attaching the wires to themselves and the window going and then being yanked through it. The whole of that setup with the stunt guys, I thought that was fascinating. That's mainly what I remember about it. Yes?
Yeah, actually, I remember hearing us in Missing Link, you were having a fight scene with Alan Carter with Nick Tate, and he actually did hit you.
Yes.
Did that actually happen?
Yes. I think Nick was very disappointed that I didn't go down. I mean, I just, did what we had rehearsed. So when I got hit, I fell out of shot, and then Paul would come in and pick up the rest of the fight. But Ray shouted, "Cut!" But I mean, I wasn't knocked out, which because Nick was, in those days, he loved his judo, and he'd try and catch you off guard and trip you with a judo hold or something. He was a very amusing fellow. So he really planted one on me, pow, right on the chin. Yeah, I fell out of shot like we practiced, and I think he was quite disappointed. I was asking, so Nick, were you disappointed that I didn't get knocked out? I was asking, yeah. So that did happen.
Wow. Do you know, excuse me, to follow up, did they use that shot of you actually getting hit in the final cut?
Yeah.
Wow.
You can see it.
Oh, it looks like it is, but I'm like, would they really use that? Wow.
All the more realistic.
I remember Xenia telling me a story, because she was in a film with Gregory Peck, and she had to hit him over the head with a telephone, and she was terrified of this. And he said, no, you go right ahead and do it. And so she did, and she sort of bopped him on the head, and he went out flat. And he was just playing, he just went sprawling and as if he was dead on the floor, and she almost died herself. Xenia, it's a shame she isn't with us anymore. She's such a lovely lady. But very, very private, very much keeping to herself. you telephone her, she wouldn't answer the phone until she heard who it was, you know, so she had her answer machine on. If she wanted to talk to whoever, then she'd pick up, otherwise you had to leave a message. So, and then she moved out of London, so I never really did see her. But every time I spoke to her, even when she was fatally ill, chirpy, hi Anton, no, everything's all right, you know, right up to the end. Hello. Yeah.
Did you ever have an opportunity to see the special effects being filmed, or were they so far away that you never?
The opportunity to see?
Did you ever have an opportunity to see any special effects film?
No, I never did. I never went there, no. Because they were in Bray, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So when you saw an episode, you thought, wow, look at that, isn't that terrific? And then shot with the, with the pilots moving in the eagles. And, do you remember those shots of the eagles and Alan? And you think, that's really neat. And especially when you look at these little models in here, thinking and it's taking place in one of those, or seemingly. And it's difficult now to realize, well, maybe not for you guys, how skilled they were in those days, without all the software that there is today to do what is being done. They really achieved amazing results, those guys. Anybody else? Yes?
There are lots of great guest stars in the series. Any favourites for you?
Oh gosh. Well, yes. Without a doubt, Peter Cushing. Who is really very nice to me as well. But there's one of the Italians who came over, a very good-looking Italian. I can't remember what episode he is in.
Troubled Spirit or Dragon's Domain.
Troubled Spirit, Dragon's Domain.
I'd have to see it. But he was in a Western, an Italian-made Western, with Klaus Kinski. And he was playing. It was like the Brando film where they beat him up and bust up his hand and he hides away in a cave and practices and comes back and shoots everybody dead. What was that called?
Fistful of Dollars?
No, it's a Marlon Brando film. Anyway, this Western was a similar sort of thing. And this guest artist played the Marlon Brando type character.
Five for Hell, Klaus Kinski, Gianni Garco, 1969. Five for Hell.
It might have, Five for Hell. It might have been.
He was in Dragon's Domain, the one with the monster,
Yeah.
Gianni Garco, maybe that was.
Okay, yeah.
He wore this in the beginning of the episode.
He might have. But I went to a convention in Italy, and he was the guest star there.
Yeah.
And he was there with his wife, and very good-looking, very tall. And this was quite a small convention. It took place in a little guest house that one of the fans owned and ran as a guest house. So there were only about maybe 20, 30 people altogether. But it's on Lake Como, and it was really nice and very family orientated. And he was there, and we got to talking, and he was talking about some of the films he had done and so on. And do you know what foot and mouth is? Do you have that disease? Okay. Well, I brought foot and mouth to Italy. Because during the conversation, I started telling him about this film that I'd seen with Klaus Kinski. Because he said he had done a film with him. And I said, oh yeah, I saw a film with him, a Western, and he was a baddie in that. And he rides into town and he takes all the women and the good folk prisoners in the bar, and he beats up our hero, who limps out of town and gets cured, and he puts on a Clint Eastwood type cape and comes back in. to seek revenge now and free the good people of the town. Except Klaus Kinski pulls a rifle and shoots him dead from the window of the saloon. No gunfight at the end. He turns around and tells his men to shoot all the prisoners, and they ride out. I said, what kind of stupid film was that? And he was very silent. And he went to his room and didn't come out for a day. Actually, it didn't click that he was the hero, so-called hero in that film. Until, after he was missing for 3 hours. And then I thought, yes, that is him. But, we had a glass of wine the next day. Yes.
So you have a lot of big stars on the show. Are you surprised by, oh, they came on the show?
What?
Well, some of them weren't as big as they are now. For instance,
Brian Blessed?
Brian Blessed was, I suppose because he was in a television series of his own there.
Yeah.
Z-Cars, I think, wasn't he? In Britain, actors are, they're working actors. It doesn't matter whether, and they realize that they might be doing really well today, but tomorrow that contract will just not arrive, and maybe for 2 years no one will employ them. So they're not precious about work. None of us are. Work is work. And if you just look at some of the work that someone like Michael Caine has done, for instance, he's just done some of those films for them. And if he was being precious about the art, he wouldn't have been in somewhere rubbishy. And a lot of people as well. I mean, a lot of people like that. They do the work. You offer me the job. The money's right, yeah, I'll do it. And the same with Space 1999. Whatever they might have, because let's face it, sci-fi is not everybody's cup of tea. Even though it's now becoming much more popular. There are people who think it's not real literature, and it's not, it's only recently there was a discussion on Radio 4 about Margaret Atwood and Handmaid's Tale, because she doesn't describe it as science fiction. She thinks it's future lit. I can't remember what the phrase was that she used, but she's hesitant to call it science fiction because it taints it somehow. So some of those visitors probably think, oh, what the hell is this all about? But the money's okay, and it's a nice, good week's work, so I'll go down there and be nicely treated, so people like Christopher Lee, who then went on in the Hobbit films, in the Ring Cycle films, 2 of them anyway, to become this big baddie, even bigger baddie than Dracula. Just does it for the money, basically. Yes.
What was it like working at Pinewood?
Well, it's great. Because you never knew who you were going to see when you walked into the canteen, into the restaurant at lunchtime. I mentioned Michael Caine. One of the things I really honestly believe is that the camera has never been as kind to Michael Caine as it should have been. Because he was stunningly good looking in real life. And he was handsome on the screen, but he wasn't as stunning as he was then in real life. Sidney Poitier, you walk in and he's having lunch, or all these, and it's great. And you really want to stand and stare, but obviously you can't do that. Right? Cool. Eat your lunch. Because we're all stargazers.
So you were only in 2 episodes of season 2.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, when they contacted my agent, they offered me the same money. And as I was just saying, we do it for the money. And I thought, no, I mean, I was probably the lowest paid person on the set anyway. I thought, well, I've been doing this for a year. Surely I should get a pay raise. And they said no, and we argued about it for 2 episodes, and then they came around and they did meet the demands. But by then, I thought, sod it, I'm off. And I decided to quit and told my agent by then. And it maybe is when he told them that I was quitting that they actually raised the money. I don't know, but by then, after series 1, and I might have said this before, for 12 months out at Pinewood, and I'd been really working very well before I started Space 1999. By the time it was over, I'd been forgotten, and people telling casting directors, "Oh, he's gone to live in America." Friends of mine. So it took me a while to get my career going again. And I thought, well, if I do this again, I'm going to be locked away in Pinewood Studios, and the same thing's going to happen all over. I don't need that. And I was getting work, so I just decided that that's what I'd continue doing. And the atmosphere on the set, when I came back, it was just so different to what it was in those Series 1, where it was really open, and people were generous in their friendships, and the whole vibe in the place was so good. Came back second time, I just, it was like walking into a strange bar where nobody knew you, and you couldn't get a drink. And so it just didn't feel as warm and friendly. So I didn't think I was missing anything anyway, apart from the money.
But we missed you.
We missed you.
Yeah.
We missed you.
I was just thinking of some people who, I just don't know, sometimes these things don't actually help your career, You get typecast and that's what you're in, and you don't get anything else. Some people just disappeared out of sight and never worked out, who were really on the up before they did Space 1999, and then seemed to just tail off quite drastically. So sometimes it's not a bad thing anyway to not be in something for too long. Yes. Anybody?
So looking back at the show, it has an amazing look. It looks like 2001: The Space Odyssey. It's more like 24 or 48 or 48 small movies. Just real filmmaking. When you look at it now and compare it to other television at the time, it just looks leagues above the competition.
Yeah.
How do you feel, looking at that from that perspective? Like the quality, the music, the special effects were the state of the art at the time, and still hold up.
I entirely agree with all of that. It does look terrific. But I suppose as an actor, what I look at more is the acting, and the acting is just so good in there. And Martin, I look at him and I marvel. I think, boy, he's really good. He really is good, Martin Landau. And when I've been looking back at it just recently, I just look at him and think, God, look what he's doing. He's making this thing really work. It's just the quality of his commitment to it, and I think is what lifts it above everything else that was at the time, and above a lot of what is there now. It's Martin's work. And then, because if you're good at the top, it drags everything else up behind it. You set a standard and people try and work to that standard. So it helps all of us. That's that sort of leadership. Did I see somebody? No?
I have maybe it's a sensitive question, but so you did the first two episodes of season 2, and then the next Doctors that followed, there were 2 other black men cast kind of in your role. And I was like, and as a kid, I was like, really? Do they think I'm going to think this is Bob Mathias? Yeah. Well, I'm just curious. What did you know that happened? And
one of them is a friend of mine, Jeffrey Kissoon.
Okay.
the thing is, we don't run into each other very often, but when we do, we sit down and have, because we have similar politics, so we tend to talk politics rather than art. But I was saying to someone here yesterday, I think, you know, that he's never been, or has he? Has he ever been asked to attend a convention? Do you know? Has anyone ever seen him at a convention? No. Man, he can be a little bit difficult, Jeffrey. And he's mainly a theatre and a very, very good theatre actor as well. But he really gets into things, and you know, I've never worked with him on stage, but friends of mine who work with him, they say, when once we start getting into rehearsal, we tend to give him a wide berth. But he's a superb actor. I first knew about him because he was up in Glasgow doing Tamburlaine the Great. Tamburlaine the Great is a play by Christopher Marlowe, and it's in 2 parts. It's a thick tome, very rarely done, but it's got some terrific stuff in it. You know, wonderful passages, and it's a great character because I mean he conquers the world. Anyway, be that as it may. One of the things I've been doing actually is working in Africa for the British Council. The British Council is an arm of the Foreign Office to promote British culture abroad, basically, and so they spend a lot of money all around the world. And I've on behalf of the British Council, been working in Ghana and in West Africa and in Tanzania on the east coast of Africa. So the National Theatre of Ghana, which is this monster building which was made by the Chinese, the first play there was directed by me because I'd been to Ghana to do some research into the culture of the place, and I was shown this building in construction. I said, wow, this stage, it was twice the length of this room. And I said, you need epic theatre in this place. And they said, oh, really? What would you suggest? I'd suggested a play and said, okay, well, you must come back and do it. And when the theatre was completed, I did go back. And that was the play which opened the auditorium. And I went out. And so I had to go back there 2 or 3 times as the play was being developed and so on. So that was, and then they wanted me to do another one. So I had to go back there and work in the university library researching the play that we're going to do. And then a bit later on, I was asked to go to Tanzania. One of the things which my company used to do is what we call theatre in education, TIE, which is, you work with the schools on a topic. The headmaster will say, yes, we'd like you to do something about the Romans in Britain. So you go away, you commission a play about the Romans in Britain, and you take it and you tour around schools in it. So the British Council asked me if I could come and introduce the idea of theatre and education in schools in Tanzania. So I then went out there and was given a company of actors and musicians and stuff, and worked and writers, and did establish a company which did TIE. So I did that for 4 years running, going to Tanzania twice a year to set up that project each year. And that was unbelievable. I don't know if any of you have been to Africa, south of the Sahara. It's almost indescribable. You really do have to go and see it for yourself. Don't believe anything you see on the newspapers or on your television set. It's not a continent full of people starving and civil war and despots. It's a country full of people who are just aspiring for a better life. And a lot of those people are just aspiring to feed their families that night. So it's a very sobering place to go to, but it's huge. It really is huge. You fly over the Sahara Desert and you look down and you read your book, and 40 minutes later you look up, you're still flying over the Sahara Desert from horizon to horizon. And you still haven't hit south of the Sahara yet. It's just massive. And it's got massive problems. So in Tanzania, for instance, 2% of the population have electricity. 2%. Which means they have to cut down trees to cook their food. So you get this deforestation going on. You can't tell people, well, you can't have charcoal. How are they going to cook? You know. And those are the kind of problems that it's not the despots, that it's just coping with life that is the main problem for them. For a lot of them, not all of them, but for a lot of them. And I bring them theatre. Anything else? Anybody else? Yes?
So what inspires you? What things or people or other things in the world, what inspires you in your work, in your life?
I suppose storytelling, because that's what we are. We're storytellers, and we've always been storytellers, and there's always been an audience for storytelling. So way back when in the caves, when all the hunters came back home at night, there's one hunter who could tell the rest of the group about that hunt that day, and he probably did it better than anybody else, so he became the storyteller. And that's what we've been doing ever since, whether it's in music or painting or theatre or what have you. We've been telling stories, and I just think we've got wonderful stories to tell. Some wonderful stories have been told, and there's more to come yet. So I'm really moved to tell stories. And we can tell stories which are heavy, which try to answer the meaning of life, other than 47. Is it 47 or 42? 42. And so there's a genre of play in the United Kingdom, or in England specifically, which are known as roots plays. These are plays which come out of Jamaica, and they deal with very, very broadly based characters, or even caricatures, who are Jamaican, and these are comedies, and very often a lot of them are not worthy of sitting through. Yes, a lot of them are misogynistic, a lot of them are homophobic, but not all of them. So I've been asked to direct, and I made it clear to those producers that I don't direct any plays which are going to be putting people down in any way, shape, or form. So I get the family-orientated ones to do it, and so on. And these plays go on at theatres which seat 1,000+ people, and the ticket prices are not cheap, and you go there on the nights that they're on, and that theatre is full to the rafters of black people who've come to see these plays which are reflecting their lives, their characters which they recognize, characters which you will never see on the West End stage of London, or in any of the legitimate, shall we say, theatres, because these people frown on these. They really look down on these plays as being totally unworthy. And they're not great literature by any means, but you know what? It's a play that the black people in England, want to see and go to see in their thousands and pay really good money. Because they then tour the play around to all the major cities, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, and they go to the biggest theatres in those cities because the small theatres won't be able to accommodate the crowds. And it's just it's giving people an opportunity to forget whatever the hell is happening outside there. They come in and they look at these two-dimensional characters who are being outrageous in one way or another, and then very silly and slapstick, and they have a really great time, and they go home. No wiser, but happier. Yes.
What is it you like to direct and to produce most? A comedy or a drama?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Comedy with drama. Of which there are some very good ones, by the way. No, it doesn't. The funny thing is, a well-written play is the hardest play to do. Because you've got to do justice to that play. You get a bad play, you think, okay, I can pull off a few tricks here and there, and fool. Yeah, people don't realize what a terrible play it is until they get home. Listen, I think, wait a minute. But you get a play by Derek Walcott, which, as far as I'm concerned, Derek, well, he won the Nobel Prize, not be said. And you look at any of his plays, they're just towering pieces of writing. And you have to do justice to those plays. You have to really drill down and make sure that every single syllable that every actor says and every move and everything you direct and the lighting and the design is true to that piece, is not letting that piece down. So it's a lot more hard work than trying to cover up a bad script. And that's a wonderful challenge when that comes. I mean, that's when you really get tense and stressed out, and and that first night arrives and you think, oh, and it works, and that's the reward, that it is work and received well by the audience, and everyone's happy. What?
This one down here.
Oh.
I just had a question about, I mean, you're so good in your work and the career that you've established. If you weren't going to be, if you weren't an actor, where do you think your life would have taken you?
With hindsight, if I had it all over to do again anyway, I would become a doctor and join MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, without a question. I just think they're saviors,
Dr. Phillips.
Yes.
That's a nice ring to it.
Yes. Yeah, I've never been called Dr. Phillips before. Doctor all sorts of other things. Anyone else? Or shall we go have some coffee?
One question.
Yeah.
Did you do RSC?
The Royal Shakespeare Company. No, I've never worked for any of the national companies, for the Royal Shakespeare Company or the National Theatre, or any of the big managements. I've always done fringe plays, very new, very avant-garde plays, lots of new writing, and in a way that's what little reputation I have is based on acting in those plays. But having not done any of those plays, I then have turned around and worked in those theatres as a director. So it's funny coming at it in that way. But no, most of my acting work has been on new theatre, new plays.
And on the Fringe up in Edinburgh?
Never been to Edinburgh, not as an actor anyway. As been up there to see plays, but never went to. I don't know if I want to anyway. Because I don't know if you know about the Edinburgh Festival. I mean, this is a massive arts festival of theatre mainly, really. And plays, they take place in people's cupboards and any space that you can get more than 2 people in becomes a theatre. And the plays queuing up to get into that cupboard once more. So they start at about 1 o'clock, and by 10 o'clock that night, maybe 4 plays will have gone into that cupboard. And that's never really appealed to me. They do have 1 or 2 theatres as well, of course. Yeah?
One more quick question. You mentioned General Hospital. When did you actually work on General Hospital?
When did I leave drama school? I left in 71. I think it was about 2 or 3 years, probably about 73, 74. I can't remember exactly when. The first television that there's a series called Warship, which was based on a frigate, and the fictional name of the frigate was HMS Hero, and that was my very first telly, and it was filmed out in Portsmouth Harbour, and it was in January, and we're supposed to be in the Mediterranean. Short sleeves.
Oh my God.
And bouncing around. It was so cold. And the storyline is that there are 2 young recruits into the Navy, and we're considering joining the submarine service. And the practice is, if you want to join the submarine service, you have to go on a submarine and see if you can cut it. So the story is built around these 2 sailors, leaving the frigate, going over to the submarine. Submarine goes down, hits an old World War II mine, and is holed. And so now it's about rescuing the submarine. And so we get into this whaler, and they swing it over, and they drop it into the harbour, turn to head off for the submarine, and the first wave breaks over. Right? And I'm sitting down there in a little short sleeve shirt in January with lines to say. It's just impossible. And then we get over to the submarine, and of course it was a nuclear submarine, and so we were able to go in, but they weren't allowed to dive with us because we hadn't got Ministry of Defence clearance. So we just did those shots. And then all the interior shots of the submarine were done in a tank in Ealing, the studios in Ealing, big tank. And this is when I really questioned my sanity, deciding to become an actor, dressed as a sailor, standing in a tank, water up to my waist, and some guy up there with a fire hose pouring water on me. Is this anything for a grown man to be doing? Pretending to be a sailor? So that was my first study experience. It was lovely. Enjoyed it. Did that answer your question? I mean, I'm not sure what the question was now.
We have time for one more question.
We've been around the barn.
Anyone on set that you were especially close with?
Especially close with,
Yeah,
on the
space.
set of, I suppose the Xenia was probably the person I was closest to. And, one notch down, Clifton, I guess. Xenia and Clifton.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's give. Thank you, Anton.